Hello and welcome to the Run Testers. My name's Nick. In this video we're going to be comparing the Adidas Boston 13 and the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5. So the Endorphin Speed 5 and the Boston 13 are both super trainers that have the foams and tech you'll find in their brand super shoes in some way involved in their design. With the Endorphin Speed 5 you've got a plate in the midsole, you've got energy rods in the Boston 13 to provide a bit more added punch. So they do fulfill a similar role for runners in that they are speed focused trainers that are also pretty versatile, but they come in at quite different prices. The Boston 13 is a fair bit cheaper. It's £140 in the UK and $160 in the US. The Endorphin Speed 5 is £180 in the UK and then $175 in the US. The Endorphin Speed 5 is the lighter shoe. It's 256 grams or 9 ounces in a UK 9, which is a US 10. The Boston is 264 grams or 9.3 ounces in a UK 9, but that's a US 9.5, so a slightly smaller shoe and still the heavier one. You've got an 8mm drop on the Endorphin Speed 5 and a 6mm drop on the Boston 13. The Endorphin Speed 5 has a stack height of 36mm at the heel, 28 at the forefoot, and in the Boston it's 36 at the heel as well, and then 30 at the forefoot. When it comes to the design of the two shoes, you've got a mesh upper on the Adidas Boston 13 with a little bit of padding around the tongue and heel. It's a much more comfortable upper than we had on the Boston 12. Then you've got a midsole that uses two different foams. The bulk of it is Light Strike Pro, the springy, most impressive foam in the Adidas range, with a bottom layer that's made from Light Strike 2.0, which is an EVA carrier foam. It's still pretty soft, but it's not as lively as the Light Strike Pro foam. Running between those two layers of foam, you have the energy rods, which are designed to act like a plate. They run the full length of the shoe and give you a bit of added propulsion and stability. Then you've got an outsole made from a mix of continental rubber and light traction rubber. You've got continental rubber using key areas like the toe off here, and then light traction rubber in other areas, which is a slightly lighter material. Then with the Endorphin Speed 5, you've also got a nice lightweight mesh upper with a bit of padding around the tongue and heel to make the shoe nice and comfortable for training runs. Then the midsole is made from Saucony's Power Run PB foam, which is a PB-based material they've been using ever since 2020. Now you've got a full-length nylon plate running through that. That's pretty flexible. It's got wings on the plate to add a bit more stability. And then when it comes to the outsole, you've got decent rubber coverage on the forefoot and a couple of strips at the back there, but it's actually fairly minimal coverage here to try and reduce the weight of the shoe.
So the fit for me in these two shoes, in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5, I'm a size 8 in the UK, this is a size 8. Very comfortable shoe. It's a bit roomier in the forefoot than I experienced in the previous version of the shoe. The midfoot's got quite a nice hold, nice lockdown, but it's not too restrictive. But it's still a bit thinner in the midfoot than the room you get in the forefoot. There's plenty of padding around the shoe. Found it to be very comfortable, nice, easy lockdown fit. I definitely stay to my size in the Speed 5. I'd probably say it's the nicest fitting of the Speeds I've tested for quite a while. The Adidas Boston 13, I got a size 8.5 in these, which is what I'd normally do with Adidas shoes. And that's pretty much spot on. Plenty of space for my big toe in half a size up. There's quite a roomy shoe in the forefoot as well, and not too bad in the midfoot. I expected this to be a little bit more restrictive based on the size that I normally, well, the fitting that I normally get in Adidas shoes, but absolutely fine. Probably say even a little bit more room than in the Speed actually in the midfoot. Similar level of padding to what you get in the Speed, and just found it to be a very comfortable shoe all in all, and easy to get a nice lockdown fit. So I'd go up half a size in the Adidas, as you probably would normally do.
So in testing, I ran in my regular UK size in both brands. That's an 8.5 in the UK. In the US though, that is a 9 in the Adidas and a 9.5 in the Saucony Endorphin Speed. Now I love the fit of the Speed 5. I get good clearance across the end of the toe box. I think there's a reason why I flex in the toe box as well. I really like these hexagon kind of mesh uppers that I think are nicely breathable. They sort of tread that line between hold and flex and airiness. There's a bit more forefoot space in this shoe than you would have found in the old Speed 4, but I get really good lockdown across the top of the midfoot, get good lace security. I was a bit worried about the kind of narrow heel collars that have been changed here, but those also just hold well and I had no issues. So overall in the Speed 5 I would recommend going true to size. Onto the fit of the Boston 13 then. This worked really well true to size for me as well. That's not true of all Adidas shoes. The Adidas Pro 4, for example, came up a bit short for length in that US 9. This is much better. It's got good clearance towards the end of the toe box. I had no problems with toes bashing up against the end of the shoe like I got in the Adidas Pro 4. Just about enough room in the toe knuckle area as well, and the uppers hold really well with a fit that I would sort of say is snug and secure, but not too tight. That's aided by a bit of stretch and flex from the uppers. I don't find them as stretchy and flexible as the Speed 5, but you do get good, secure midfoot hold that locks down without any trouble. I think the medium padded heel collars here offer good comfort, and the lightly padded tongues also prevent any lace pinch. So again, overall, I'd recommend going true to size in the Boston 13.
When it comes to fit of the Endorphin Speed 5 and Boston 13, I've got a UK 9 in both shoes, which is my normal size with both brands, but it converts differently around the world. So the Saucony is a US 10 and the Adidas is a US 9.5. Now, I can generally get away with this because I'm usually in between those two sizes anyway, and I've got a decent fit with both shoes. But the Boston does fit a little bit more tightly because it is a slightly smaller shoe. Say if you're anywhere else in the world, you wouldn't have to worry about this. I'd just go with your normal running shoe size. If you're in the UK, just bear it in mind that the Adidas shoe will come up a bit smaller and you might have to go half a size up. Other than that, I've got no real concerns with the fit of either shoe. They are both pretty comfortable uppers with a bit of padding here. For what are lightweight shoes that have a speedy focus, the uppers are comfortable enough to also use them for daily training and slip on each day without worrying that they're going to cut you up in some way or anything like that. So yeah, good fit on both shoes. Stick to your normal size in general. Just be aware of the Adidas shoes can come up a little bit smaller if you're using UK sizing. So, done a fair bit of running in both of these shoes, having logged 60k in the Adidas Boston 13 and 90k in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5 in recent weeks. During my marathon training, I've used them for a really wide mix of runs because these are very versatile shoes, including workouts, both interval and tempo workouts, flat out easy runs, progression runs, moving from an easy to a steady pace. I've done quite a few long runs actually in the Endorphin Speed 5 by using it for quite long sessions, and there are two shoes that I rate really quite highly. I'd say I've used the Speed for harder workouts and used it for an all-out park run as well. And I've actually tended to use it over the Boston because I do think it is the faster shoe. It's the one that if I go with my gut feel, it's the one that I think delivers a faster ride of these two shoes. So I'm happier taking it down the track instead of a carbon plate shoe, for example, because it always produces the goods. It's a really fast shoe with its very rocketed ride with that Power Run PB foam that isn't the most explosively bouncy or anything like that, but is a very responsive foam, gives a lot of energy return. Nylon plates in there, giving you a degree of flexibility, but also a nice amount of pop. And yeah, it's just worked very well for me ever since the original version of the shoe. The Endorphin Speed is just a fantastic speed shoe that then feels very nice, relaxed and cruisy at easy paces with enough comfort at the heel of the shoe where I land, and then a good rocker that rolls you through without feeling too aggressive. The Boston 13 has a flatter ride to it, I would say. It's got a little bit more snap through, even though it's the lower drop shoe of the two. It doesn't feel quite as rockered. It's still a fast shoe, but I don't feel as good in it for workouts. I think though it does have that Light Strike Pro foam in there, especially under the forefoot, and that is a nice bouncy foam. It's probably a better foam than Power Run PB, I'd say. With a combination with the rods and the other Light Strike foam in there and the geometry of the shoe, it doesn't feel as fast to me and as smooth as the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5. It still feels very good, don't get me wrong. I think this is a really outstanding shoe all round, but don't think you get quite the level of speed and flow that I get in the Endorphin Speed 5. Then the Boston 13 is also nice at relaxed paces as well. Again, you don't get quite as smooth a ride as the Endorphin Speed 5, but it is a comfortable shoe. The two foams work together quite nicely to give you a degree of stability and comfort without it being as cushy and comfortable as a general daily trainer, but I've certainly been very happy just rolling along in the Boston 13 at easy paces, and the absence of a full plate in there means it doesn't feel too stiff and uncomfortable. I did do a short run wearing both shoes at the same time, and it's interesting that for super trainers that are highly rated, and I highly rate, they don't have the springiest, most explosive ride. Like compared to some of the other options on the market, something like the Hoka Mach X2, they have a more natural feel all round, but you do get a nice degree of pop of both. They both feel quite normal underfoot, but fast. And then with the Speed, you do get that extra feeling of this rocker, the smooth rocker, giving you that nice rhythm to your running. And I do think that really comes into play when you're trying to hold a pace over a long distance, a faster pace. So yeah, I did notice that I was running both of them at the same time. I think they're both fairly stable for super trainers. I think maybe the Endorphin Speed 5 feels a bit more stable to me because it doesn't have any cutouts on the side of the shoe underneath, and you've got that nylon plate in there giving you a bit of stability. Neither are going to be very stable shoes if you are someone who needs a bit more support, but I think you get a bit more of that from the Endorphin Speed 5.
Onto the testing then, and I have logged north of 40 miles in both shoes. I've pushed them across a range of paces. I've done a lot of different sessions. I've done everything from easy recovery runs right up to 5k pace intervals. My longest run in the Boston 13 took me up to 90 minutes on feet. Meanwhile, in the Speed 5, I also did a 90-minute mixed pace run. Speed 5, I also did a progression run moving up through the gears across paces. Now, most of my miles, as usual, have been on the road. Sometimes I have veered onto light off-road, kind of river paths and that kind of stuff. Now, these two shoes, I think, are built to cover similar runs. You've got like a fast edge training partner to your all-out carbon shoe that you can use to, I'd say, cover a lot of runs in a marathon training block, by which I mean you're going to get enough punch for the shorter, faster runs, but enough protection for longer tempo runs as well, and some slower than marathon pace kind of cruising potential thrown in as well. So there's a good dose of versatility in both of these shoes. When you put them on side by side and take them out for a spin, they've even sort of got quite a similar feel overall on the foot in terms of the kind of weight and the way they hold the foot. They're both on the firmer side, relying on the rockering and a bit of stiffness. They're cushioned, but they definitely skew firmer than some of the other daily trainers. Now, the Boston 13 is a touch heavier with a bit more foam under the forefoot, so arguably you think you'd get a bit more protection. I'm not sure that's entirely true, but it's got most of what I'd look for in a solid rotation workhorse, albeit, as I said, with a firmer, more responsive ride than you get from the sort of softer, bouncier, springier trainers. You might call it a shade blocky, but with it you get good stability, and I think there's just enough versatility in the Boston to handle endurance miles as well as the faster sessions. Now, it may not be the softest option going, and I don't quite find it as punchy and precise as the Speed 5, but if you value a snappier, more engaging ride, it's definitely worth a look. Overall, a strong everyday trainer, and I'd say it's another excellent suitcase shoe that can cater for a lot of your weekly miles. It's probably also quite a good partner if anyone's kind of using the Adidas Pro 4 as their race day shoe. When it comes to the Speed 5, I'm like an unashamed paid up member of the Speed fan club, and I think this latest update hasn't changed that. It's starting to feel different to some of the bigger stacks, softer, springier, sort of bouncier daily trainers that you've got, but I like that Saucony has resisted the urge to swap in a wedge of that super squishy and credi run foam that you've got from the Endorphin Elite 2 that's really sinky. And in some ways, I think it makes this Speed 5 still a closer comparison to the Boston 13, with another ride that's not overly soft, it's not too bouncy, and I think some might find it a little more direct to move, sort of if you're moving heavier over the longer mileage runs. But I still think it's a cracking all-rounder, and I'd say it's light and fast enough for your faster training mile. It's cushioned and protective and smooth enough to handle the slower miles as well. But when I say this about both these shoes, I'm okay with a more direct shoe, even when I'm going slower, heavier, even my recovery miles. So I'd still say the Speed 5 can handle it all just like the Boston 13 can. I like the fact that both the Boston 13 and the Speed 5 give energy but don't try to do all the work for you like those other bouncier daily trainers that I've been mentioning. That, I think, is still a positive. If you like that kind of ride like I do, then you'll like these two shoes.
So these two shoes are quite similar in a lot of ways. They have similar designs when it comes to the fact that they have rods and plates in them. The midsole is quite similar in the way that it feels. They're not very soft shoes. They're definitely shoes that are designed for that more responsive, quicker turnover than what you might get with a softer shoe. But equally, there's not a lot of energy return in them as well. They're very much shoes that feel a bit more conventional in the way that they run. And to be honest, I would use these for the same sort of thing as well. So I think these are both really good training partners to faster race shoes that you're going to churn out the miles with. But I think that the main difference comes into how versatile they are for that training. The thing about the Boston 13 is I actually really enjoy running in the Boston 13. I found it to have a nice turnover. I like the balanced midsole. It does have a combination of these foams, this Light Strike Pro, which is a bit softer, which is getting in the race shoes, and this slightly firmer section at the bottom of the shoe. And it is a nice balanced ride. Definitely good for picking up the pace a bit, definitely good for doing harder training sessions, intervals, things like that. But I would say it's not particularly good at easy runs because it's just a little bit firm for me in the midsole, and I much prefer something like the Adidas Evo SL, which is a soft shoe that is quite versatile as well. So the real speed from that shoe comes from the energy return you get from it and the bounce, whereas you don't really get that in this. It's more of a nippy ride that you get from the combination of that midsole and the rods. But I very much enjoy testing the Boston 13. I think it's a solid shoe, and it's the first time I've used a Boston shoe. So yeah, definitely a good versatile shoe if you like something a little bit more firm in comparison to things like the Evo SL. The Saucony Endorphin Speed 5, very similar in a lot of ways, is a little bit softer for me than the Boston 13. But I also think it's a bit more versatile as a result as well. So it's a bit better at easy runs. But also I think you can pick up the pace a bit more in this as well in a more comfortable, enjoyable way. I think there is a little bit more energy return in this shoe. And I also think it feels a bit more natural as well than you get in the Boston 13. So I do think they're quite similar, but I think that there's certain things about the Speed that probably more accessible to a lot of people, mainly because of that midsole foam and the more natural ride, which is the Boston 13 seems a little bit clunkier if you're comparing it with the Speed 5. But I do think they're both very, very good shoes. The outsole on the Boston 13, really, really good. You've got this nice continental rubber section at the back and the forefoot. Below it, don't think that's continental rubber there, but it's got a really good thick covering of rubber, good level of grip on it as well. Speed is pretty much the same as what you get in the previous versions. Good bit of rubber at the back and at the front. I have seen a bit of wear in about 60 kilometers of running in the on the foam, but I've seen that in majority of the Speeds. But solid outsole. I think the Boston 13's got better outsole
there. Verdict then, and though I think these two shoes are both good utility shoes that handle a lot, I've definitely got a clear favourite here. If we're talking solely about the ride, fit, comfort and versatility, I would choose the Saucony Endorphin Speed 5 over the Boston 13. I think on balance it offers more at the upper paces, and I think it handles just as well at the easier end of things as the Boston 13. Feels a bit more agile to me, and there's a mildly softer edge to it. I think particularly sort of in the heel, it's a bit softer back there. The Boston 13 can feel a bit more blocky by comparison. So even though the Saucony Speed 5 is pricier, for me it beats the Boston 13 on that range, and the sort of lightweight performance that it serves up. However, I enjoyed my miles in the Boston 13 as well, and if you're on a budget, it does offer a lot for notably less. So if you're after value, I think there's a case for maybe choosing the Boston 13. Having said that, I've not run in the Evo SL2, and those should also come into consideration, I think, if money's a factor. I also really like the New Balance Rebel V5 as a kind of counterpoint to both of these.
So my verdict on these two shoes, I think they're very good shoes. I think they're comparable in a lot of ways, but I think that the Speed 5 edges it for me because it just feels a little bit more versatile. I think it's better at easy runs. I think it's better at faster sessions as well. It just feels a bit more natural, a little bit more from that midsole. And it's just a nicer shoe, I think. I think it's more accessible to a lot of people. And I think if you get this shoe, you can't really go wrong with it. I think the Boston 13 is a really good shoe. I just think it's a little bit clunkier than the Speed 5. It just feels a little bit blockier, a little bit less natural feeling. And I don't get as much energy return from Boston 13 as I do from the Speed 5. There's not loads in the Speed 5, but I just think the Boston 13 just feels like there's a little bit more of a dense shoe on the foot. And as a result, it's not as enjoyable to run in as the Speed 5. I think the only people that would prefer the Boston 13 over the Speed 5 is probably if you're looking for a little bit more of a denser, firmer midsole foam. But that's really all you're getting from the Boston 13 that you're not getting from the Speed 5. So I'm going to go Saucony Endorphin Speed 5 all the way on this one.
So verdict, you've got two shoes here that I think can do the same job for runners in being your fast training shoe that you add to a rotation alongside a more cushioned option that can pick up a lot of workouts and that kind of thing. Or just one shoe to do everything in if you do want that, because they are versatile shoes, they do work well at pace, they are pretty comfortable at easy paces as well. They come in at different prices. Boston is cheaper, so they both can do the same job, but I think they do it to a standard that reflects their prices, because the Endorphin Speed 5 is a little bit more expensive, but I think it is better than the Boston 13 at both easy and fast paces for me. Now, there's not loads in it here. I don't think it's like night and day the difference in performance here, but I prefer the ride feel of the Endorphin Speed 5. It does feel like a faster shoe, it's a lighter shoe, and I do actually enjoy it slightly more for easy runs as well, just because of the way it's set up. It feels a bit more comfortable at the heel of the shoe than the Boston does, which is where I land. So yeah, I would go for the Endorphin Speed 5. I'd probably pay the extra to get it, but at the same time, it's 40 quid more in the UK, so it's quite a lot more. Like in the US, the gap's a bit smaller. I think the Endorphin Speed 5 is certainly worth the extra there, but in the UK, a substantial extra outlay that. So there's more of a debate there. I do think it's a better shoe, but the Boston 13 is a very good shoe. It's also a very good looking shoe, and I think that may help me pick the Boston, because you can use it for the same kind of runs. It will deliver a good performance, but I do think you get a slightly better shoe if you go for the Endorphin Speed 5. So yeah, overall, I'm going to lean towards that. But yeah, Boston 13 is certainly a good shoe, and yeah, what a colourway.